As the power struggle ensued in the political arena, and the quality of Roman life declined, the empire was racked by chaos. It was then
Shadow of Rome came out on the PS2 in 2005, and it's one of those games that really stuck with me. Not because it was some hidden masterpiece or anything, but because it was doing something different. Capcom put out this mix of brutal gladiator combat and slow-paced stealth, all wrapped up in a Roman political drama. And while it didn't always come together perfectly, it worked more often than it didn't. You play as Agrippa, a soldier forced to fight as a gladiator, and Octavianus, who's sneaking around trying to uncover what really happened to Julius Caesar. The contrast between the two characters gives the game a unique pacing. One minute you're bashing skulls in front of a cheering crowd, and the next you're in disguise slipping through a guarded hallway. It can be a little jarring at times, but it makes the game feel bigger than what it really is. The game didn't sell all that well, and most people probably forgot about it. But looking back, there's a lot here that really still holds up. The combat has a lot of weight to it, the arenas feel alive, and even the stealth, as janky as they are, had ideas that could work with some polish. In this video, I want to go over all the gameplay, the tone, what holds up today, and why I think Shadow of Rome really deserves another shot, whether it's a full remake or just the right kind of spiritual successor. Before we really get into the game, I want to go over what it even is. Because Shadow of Rome didn't come out of nowhere. This was a Capcom project, built during a time where they were experimenting with a lot of different genres on the PS2. The game was produced by Keiji Inafune, and it was originally intended to appeal to Western audiences. That's a big part of why it focuses so much on graphic violence and cinematic presentation. They weren't trying to make another traditional Japanese action game. This was their shot at something more in line with Hollywood. Where it released in 2005, by that point, the PS2 already had a pretty stacked lineup. God of War launched just a month later, and Resident Evil 4 was already out in Japan. So even though Shadow of Rome brought some interesting mechanics to the table, it got buried under bigger names with bigger marketing, and never really had a chance to break through. What's even more interesting is that this was supposed to be the start of a new series. Capcom had plans for Shadow of Rome 2, but after the first game didn't meet the sales expectations, they just kinda shelved it. And some of that development work ended up getting folded into what eventually became Dead Rising. So if you ever played that game and felt something kind of familiar in tone or structure, that's probably why. And the timing kind of hurt it too. 2005 was right on the edge of the next console generation. With the Xbox 360 just months away, publishers were already shifting focus, and a single-player linear Roman-themed action game didn't exactly scream long-term investment at the time. It was a weird in-between moment, and Shadow of Rome kinda just got lost. But just because it didn't land commercially doesn't mean it didn't have value. Capcom was taking risks here. They tried to blend multiple gameplay styles and wrap it in a semi-historical story, and give it weight through voice acting and atmosphere and presentation. It didn't all come together perfectly, but the fact they even tried something this ambitious makes it worth revisiting. So what is Shadow of Rome? It's a third-person action game with two very different gameplay styles, and it switches back and forth between them depending on where you are in the story. You spend half the game playing as Agrippa, a Roman soldier whose father is accused of assassinating Julius Caesar. And to try and clear his father's name, Agrippa ends up forced into the gladiator arena. His sections are all about close-range combat, bloody, brutal, and focused on entertaining the crowd as much as surviving. The other half of the game he plays Octavianus, Agrippa's childhood friend. He's not a fighter though. His role is about stealth, investigation, and navigating the political side of the story. So it's kind of like two genres in one game. Agrippa's half plays like a traditional action brawler. You're fighting in arenas with different layouts and objectives. Sometimes it's a one-on-one, or other times you're taking on whole groups or riding a chariot. You pick up weapons off the ground and most of them break after a while, so you're constantly adapting to what you've got around you. There's also a full dismemberment system. You can cut off arms and legs, and it affects how enemies fight back. And finishing moves can hype up the crowd. That's where the salvo system comes in. The better you perform, chaining kills or using flashy finishers, switching weapons a lot, the more the crowd cheers. They'll even throw you weapons or healing items if you keep them excited. It's not just about winning the fight, it's about entertaining the people. Octavianus' sections couldn't be more different. There's no combat here. You're sneaking through palaces and city streets or courtyards, trying not to get caught by guards. The stealth is pretty basic. You can crouch, hide in pots, sneak behind enemies, but the main mechanic is disguises. You can knock people out, steal their clothes, which lets you walk around in restricted areas as long as you don't do anything suspicious. It's much slower paced and more trial and error, but it adds something the combat doesn't. There's a sense of tension and mystery. You're learning more about the conspiracy behind Caesar's death and how deep it runs through Roman politics. It's pretty clunky at times and the AI can be frustrating, but the concept was pretty ambitious. The game flips between these two characters in a way that keeps the pace moving. You'll go through a few big fights with Agrippa, then switch to Octavianus for some stealth and story progression, then back into the arena. It's not always a smooth transition, but it keeps things from getting stale, and it gives the world a little bit more depth. One character shows the violence and spectacle of Rome, the other gives you a look behind the curtain, and what's going on with the Senate and the betrayal that kicks off the story. So at its core, Shadow of Rome is a mix of action and stealth, built around a revenge story set during one of the most dramatic periods in Roman history. And whether the gameplay clicks with you or not, It's hard to ignore how much the developers were trying to do here. It doesn't feel safe, it feels like a team that wanted to push boundaries, even if everything didn't land perfectly. So now that we know what the game even is, I want to start talking about Agrippa and his side of the gameplay, because honestly this is where Shadow of Rome is at its best. His arena combat sections are brutal, fast-paced, and surprisingly deep for the time the game came out. On the surface, it might just look like a button-mashing gladiator game, but there's a real rhythm to it. The first thing that stands out is how the game handles weapons. You don't carry a loadout or manage inventory between fights. Everything's picked up off the ground, and most weapons break after a few uses. So you're constantly switching between swords and clubs, maces, spears, even severed limbs if it comes down to it. Every weapon has its own feel and style. Some are slower but do more damage, others are quick and fast, and some let you throw for ranged attacks. It forces you to stay active, to always be thinking about what's around you and how to use it. Then you've got the dismemberment system, which is honestly one of the game's most defining features. And it's not just for gore. There is a lot of that, but it actually affects gameplay. If you cut off an enemy's arm, they'll drop their weapon and come at you barehanded. If you cut off a leg, they'll start to crawl. And once they're down, you can finish them off with a brutal execution. And it's all tied into the salvo system, which basically scores you based on how flashy and entertaining your performance is. Because the crowd responds to everything you do. If you fight well, they'll cheer really loud, and they'll start throwing you better weapons or healing items. And it adds an extra layer of pressure, because Agrippa isn't just trying to win and survive. He's trying to put on a good performance for the people. But the salvo system goes a lot deeper than just crowd reactions. At the end of each arena fight, the game actually grades your performance. You get bronze, silver, or gold, based on how well you entertain the audience. It tracks how many unique finishers you used, how many limbs you removed, what weapons you picked up, and whether you kept things fresh or just spammed the same move over and over again. If you're just trying to survive, you can get by with bronze, but if you really want to push it and go for the gold, you have to make sure you put on an entertaining show for the people of Rome. The game doesn't just throw that in for bragging rights either. It gives you a reason to go back. You can replay any arena battle to improve your score, and some of them are genuinely pretty tough to max out unless you're experimenting with your approach. Maybe you missed a certain environmental kill, or didn't finish the fight fast enough, or didn't switch weapons often enough to keep the salvo points climbing. There's real replay value there. It's one of the systems that encourages you to play aggressively, try new things, and not just rely on what's safe. And in a weird way, it actually gives the combat more depth without needing complicated combos or upgrade trees. It's all built around performance and creativity. That's something most action games, even now, don't fully lean into, and Shadow of Rome was doing it on the PS2. And the arenas themselves aren't just flat circles with enemies running at you. Some matches have objectives, like surviving a set amount of time, teaming up with allies, or taking down a boss. Others change the environment entirely, like the chariot racing sections. They're on-rail combat segments where you're driving at full speed, slashing at other riders, or trying to just win the race. They're pretty rough in some areas, but they break things up nicely and keep the pace from feeling too stale. What really works about Agrippa's gameplay is how weighty it feels. The hits land really hard. Enemies react to your attacks, and the sound design makes everything feel more violent. There's a sense of momentum. You're moving between enemies, picking up whatever weapon you can find, reacting in real time, and constantly adjusting your approach. It's not combo heavy like Devil May Cry or anything, but it doesn't need to be. The simplicity actually works in its favor because it lets the focus stay on the spectacle. One thing worth mentioning though, is that the AI isn't the smartest. Enemies can get stuck or stand around awkwardly at times, and your allies don't always help much, but the game keeps things moving fast enough that it doesn't totally break the experience. Most of the fun comes from the feeling of being in control, dominating the arena, responding to whatever chaos unfolds and making it look good while you do it. If anything, the biggest strength of Agrippa's gameplay is just how satisfying it is. There's something primal about it. The roar of the crowd, the blood spraying across the sand, the way weapons crack and splinter in your hands. It all comes together to create this gritty, high-stakes energy that's still fun to revisit. It's the kind of gameplay that with a few updates and some modern polish, could absolutely hold up today. And when you compare it to the slower pace of Octavianus' stealth sections, Agrippa's part of the game really carries the weight of the experience. It's what most people remember when they think about Shadow of Rome. Just real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing to the channel. I've been putting a lot of time into covering games like this, especially the ones most people forgot about, and I have plenty more lined up. If you're into these deep dive breakdowns, or just want to hear someone talk about games that meant something to them, this is the spot. There's no pressure, but it does help the channel grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Now switching genres completely over to Octavianus, the tone of the game is completely different. His sections are built around stealth and investigation, and compared to Agrippa's combat-heavy gameplay, this is where things really slow down. You're not fighting anybody, you're sneaking through palaces and government buildings, trying to gather clues and expose the real story behind Caesar's assassination. The core of his gameplay is disguise and avoidance. You sneak around, find people wearing the right outfit, knock them out, and take their clothes to blend in. Guards won't bother you unless they get suspicious, and if you mess up or get caught, it's usually an instant death. There's no combat option, you're not overpowering anyone. It's all about timing, patience, and understanding the guard patterns. It's simple, and honestly, it feels pretty clunky at times, and again, the AI isn't great. It's probably worse than Agrippa's section, and the controls aren't as responsive as you'd want in a stealth system. There's a lot of trial and error, and sometimes the game just doesn't give you the feedback you need to correct your mistakes. But these sections aren't here for the gameplay alone. They're here for the story. Octavianus is the one uncovering what's really going on in the Senate. He's moving through the back rooms of power while Agrippa is out in the open, fighting to survive. That contrast adds a real depth, even if the mechanics don't always land. Some of these missions do get a little creative, like sneaking into a bathhouse in disguise or navigating areas without being able to change your outfit. And while it's never as refined as the action side, it does help flesh out the world and give the story more room to breathe. It's not the highlight of the game by any means at all, but it does serve a purpose. So before we get into this next part, I do want to give you a warning that I'm going to be jumping into the story now, so if you want to experience it for yourself, you may want to skip this part. I'm not going too in-depth, but still, I wanted to give you the warning. But the story in Shadow of Rome starts with a pretty big moment. Julius Caesar gets assassinated, and then it just kicks off right after that. We have this Roman soldier, Vespanius, who gets blamed for the whole thing. He's quickly set to be executed. There's no trial or defense. He's pretty much just scapegoated. His son, Agrippa, our protagonist, is a centurion who's out fighting wars when he gets the news. He heads back to Rome, and everything's already falling apart. At the same time, we have Octavianus, Caesar's nephew, who doesn't buy the official story. He's younger, not a fighter, but he's smart. He starts poking around, trying to figure out who actually planned the assassination. And from there, the game splits between these two paths. Agrippa signs up for a gladiator tournament, hoping to win and have a chance to save his father. Octavianus stays in the background, sneaking into the Senate and uncovering who's really behind all this. And that's honestly a pretty solid setup. It's not just fight your way through ancient Rome. There's a real revenge plot here, a political conspiracy, and a constant feeling that things are way bigger than what the characters can see at the start. The game flips back and forth between both sides of the story. Agrippa is out fighting in the arena, while Octavianus is sneaking into meetings, reading letters, and listening in on conversations, slowly piecing together who's pulling the strings. You find out there's this whole network of conspirators, and the guy who really benefits from Caesar's death is Antonius. He forged the will to make himself the heir, even though Caesar had actually named Octavianus. As things begin to escalate, we do get some decent twists. Agrippa watches his mom get executed and can't stop it. Octavianus sees friends get killed or betrayed. Eventually, it all leads to Agrippa fighting Decius Brutus in the arena, one of the men behind the assassination, and Octavianus exposing Antonius as the real traitor. It ends with Agrippa killing Decius, Antonius trying to escape, and a final battle that I feel wraps it up pretty cleanly. Tone-wise, the game's all over the place though, but in a weirdly good way. Some scenes play it pretty straight, like a full-on political drama with some betrayal and power grabs. But then you've got parts where Octavianus is putting on a disguise and sneaking into places dressed as a servant or even a woman. And the combat, it's very exaggerated. You know, limbs flying, crowds cheering, over-the-top villain speeches. It's pretty theatrical, but it kind of works. Because the game never claims to be historically accurate. It's using Roman history as a setting for something more stylized. It's not subtle, and it's definitely not grounded the whole way through, but it does commit to its tone. And there is a real story here. We have betrayal, identity, family, revenge, and a lot of emotional payoff. Even with the not-so-great stealth sections and the over-the-top acting, it's still way more ambitious than most people probably expected when they saw a gladiator game on the PS2. But when Shadow of Rome dropped, it didn't exactly blow up. It got decent reviews, some people liked it, some others didn't, but it kind of landed in the middle space. Critics gave it around a 7 out of 10, the combat got a lot of praise, it was bloody and satisfying and different enough to stand out. GameSpot gave it an 8.2 and called the story intriguing, and the cutscenes were pretty solid for the time, but the stealth sections is where it lost a lot of people. Reviews were mixed, some said it added depth, and others said it just dragged the game down. Eurogamer gave it a 6 out of 10, and basically said the stealth felt tedious and basic, and honestly they weren't wrong. The AI was pretty rough, and it didn't have the same punch as the arena fights. As far as sales go, it just didn't do very well. Capcom built this for a Western audience, but it didn't catch on. It came out at a weird time too, in 2005, right before the next console generation started, and a lot of people probably just skipped over it. Capcom had plans for a sequel, but those were scrapped after the numbers came in. Instead, a lot of what they were working on ended up being recycled into Dead Rising. But here's the thing. The people who did play Shadow of Rome, a lot of them still talk about it. It's one of those weird PS2 games that stuck with us. You see it pop up on Reddit sometimes, YouTube comments, people calling it underrated or begging for a remaster. And I get it. It's not just nostalgia talking. This game was trying something bold. It mixed genres, took risks, and even when it didn't fully stick, it did leave a mark. Shadow of Rome didn't become a franchise. It didn't get the recognition it probably deserved, but it carved out a little space in gaming history as one of those ambitious overlooked titles that still have something to offer, if we go back and give it a chance. If there's one thing that sticks with me after revisiting Shadow of Rome, it's how much wasted potential is setting in this game. This was a one-off title from Capcom that honestly had all the right pieces to become a full franchise, but it came out at the wrong time, didn't get the right push, and just kinda disappeared. And that's a shame, because this game had ideas that could thrive today. Ancient Rome is still one of the most underused periods in gaming. You've got this era filled with war, politics, betrayal, brutality, and yet most developers avoid it or only use it as a backdrop. Shadow of Rome actually built a story around it. Not just some throwaway campaign in a bigger sandbox, but a focused narrative that leaned into the drama and power struggles of the time. That's something people would show up for now. especially with how much story-driven single-player games have come back into focus. And then there's the gameplay. Agrippa's arena combat, that still holds up pretty well. It's not overly complicated, but it's violent, reactive, and built around spectacle. People love that kind of gameplay now. You look at games like Rise Son of Rome, Ghost of Tsushima, or even For Honor, and you see that modern audiences want combat that feels heavy and satisfying. All Shadow of Rome needs is a modern engine and some updated mechanics, and this could easily be one of the most unique third-person action games on the market. The stealth side with Octavianus definitely needs work, but the core idea is still worth keeping. Having a second character who explores the political side of the world and uncovers the truth through investigation adds a layer most action games don't have. In a remake, that stuff can be fleshed out. Much better AI, more tools for stealth, more dynamic missions. It can be turned into something that balances out the action without dragging the pace. And the big thing is, this isn't just about nostalgia. I'm not saying bring it back because I liked it as a kid. I'm saying this is a smart, bold game that didn't get a fair shot. It tried things most games back then weren't willing to try. And now that the industry has caught up a bit, where people actually want tighter single-player experiences and are open to historical games again, Shadow of Rome fits better now than it did in 2005. And Capcom's been doing a lot of right things lately. They've been rebuilding franchises and putting care into their legacy titles. And if there was ever a time to take another look at Shadow of Rome, to bring it back either as a remake or even something new inspired by it, this is the window. The foundation is already there. The gameplay's fun, the world's interesting, the story holds up. It just needs a second chance. Well folks, that wraps up Shadow of Rome. If you enjoyed it and made it all the way to the end, seriously thank you. I tried scripting this one a bit different, so I didn't go too in-depth and make an hour-long video, but I do put a lot of time into these. And the fact that you're still here, still listening, it really means a lot. Shadow of Rome is one of those games I've always wanted to talk about, and getting to share it with people who care about this kind of stuff too, that's honestly the best part of doing this. Also, I just want to say how excited I am about how fast the channel's been growing lately. We recently passed 300 subscribers, which might not seem huge to a lot of people, but to me, it's massive. I just like playing games, and I want to give them the kind of attention I think they deserve. And the fact that more and more of you are showing up for that, it really means a lot. Thank you for being here. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, drop a comment, or subscribe if you haven't yet. There's a lot more coming, more forgotten games, more deep dives, and more stuff I'm genuinely excited to talk about. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next one.